The massive trading station called Nexus Prime hummed with activity. Massive windows stretched across its curved walls, showing endless stars and the busy paths of incoming and outgoing ships. Among the thousands of travelers, a small group of humans moved carefully through the crowded corridors. Eun-Ji Park adjusted the worn sleeve of her simple work jacket. Her hands were calloused from years of fixing machines, and her eyes constantly moved, taking in every detail of the station. She was not like the other humans in her group. While they wore pressed uniforms and talked about trade agreements, she looked like someone who had spent more time in machine rooms than meeting halls. The station was filled with alien species from across the galaxy. Tall, elegant beings with shimmering skin walked past shorter, bulky creatures with multiple arms. Holographic displays flickered everywhere, showing trade prices, shipping routes, and local advertisements. But Eun-Ji paid little attention to the fancy screens. Her eyes were always looking at the machines, the pipes, the complex systems that kept this massive station running. Nearby, a group of Krellian aristocrats watched the human delegation with clear disdain. Lord Derek Voss stood the tallest, his blue-tinted skin gleaming under the station's artificial lights. His sister, Lady Aria Voss, stood slightly behind him, her long neck stretched high as she looked down at the humans. Another human delegation, Lord Derek said loudly, making sure the humans could hear him. His voice was deep and carried easily through the crowded corridor. I wonder what simple trade they hope to negotiate this time. Lady Aria laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the station's background noise. Humans, she said, her voice dripping with mockery, always thinking they can compete with advanced civilizations. Eun-Ji heard every word. She did not react. Years of working in tough conditions had taught her to stay calm, to listen, and to learn. While the other humans in her group looked uncomfortable, she simply continued walking, her eyes still scanning the station's complex infrastructure. The Krellian aristocrats wore clothing that looked like it cost more than Eun-Ji would earn in several years, shimmering fabrics that changed color as they moved, intricate designs that spoke of wealth and status. Lord Derek's outfit was deep purple with silver threads that seemed to move like liquid. Lady Aria wore a dress that looked like it was made of light itself, shifting between blues and greens with each movement. In contrast, Eun-Ji's clothing was practical. A dark gray work jacket with multiple pockets, sturdy pants with reinforced knees, and comfortable boots that had clearly seen many miles. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried a small bag that contained her most important tools. The human delegation continued walking. Important-looking people discussed trade routes and economic agreements. But Eun-Ji was different. While others talked, she observed. She watched how the station's systems worked, how the machines moved, how energy flowed through the complex network of pipes and electrical conduits. Lord Derek continued his loud commentary. Humans are barely more than workers, he told his sister. They have no real understanding of advanced technology. They are like children playing with machines they cannot possibly understand. Lady Aria nodded, her laugh echoing through the corridor. Peasants, she said, thinking they can play in a world of aristocrats. What they did not know was that Eun-Ji heard every word, and while she did not show any reaction on her face, her mind was already working. She saw things others did not see. Where they saw complex systems, she saw opportunities. Where they saw impossible challenges, she saw puzzles waiting to be solved. The human delegation moved forward. Eun-Ji walked with them, looking calm and ordinary. But behind her quiet exterior, something was brewing. A solution. A breakthrough. A moment that would change everything. No one noticed the quiet woman with calloused hands and sharp eyes. Not yet. The massive engineering hall was unlike anything Eun-Ji had ever seen. Huge machines filled the space, each one bigger than the small workshops she used to work in back on Earth. Lights of blue, green, and purple flickered across complex metal structures. Alien engineers from different species moved around complicated equipment, their movements precise and careful. Lord Derek Voss stepped forward, his voice booming through the hall. "We have a challenge," he announced. "A challenge that has defeated our best minds for decades." Behind him, a holographic display came to life. It showed a complex quantum stabilization system that looked like a maze of interconnected energy lines. The image was so complicated that most of the human delegation took a step back. Not Unji. She leaned forward, her eyes narrow and focused. "This system controls the energy flow for 3 major trade routes," Lord Derek explained. "It has been failing slowly for the past 23 years. Our top engineers have tried everything. No one has been able to fix it completely." The other engineers in the room looked nervous. Some of the alien engineers whispered to each other. Their advanced technology, something they were so proud of, had a problem they could not solve. It was like a wound in their pride. Yunji's colleagues looked worried. Trade agreements depended on solving this problem. If they failed, their entire mission would be a waste. Important people had spent a lot of money to send this delegation to Nexus Prime. Lord Derek continued, "We will give each team 2 standard days to present a solution. The team that provides the most effective repair will win significant trade rights and technology exchange agreements." The room buzzed with excitement. Trade rights were valuable. They could mean millions in economic benefits. Every engineer in the room wanted to solve this puzzle. The elite alien engineering teams moved first. They were confident. These were the best minds from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Their computers were massive. Their tools looked like magic. They began running complex simulations, their fingers moving across holographic displays. Yunji watched. She did not rush. While others typed quickly and ran complicated programs, she observed. Her eyes moved across the system diagram. She noticed small details that others missed. Most of the alien engineers used very complex methods. They had powerful computers that could run millions of calculations per second. They used theories that took years to understand. But Unji saw something different. She saw a simple problem hiding under many complicated layers. One of the lead alien engineers noticed her standing quietly. "And what will you do?" he asked, his voice full of mockery. "Will you try to fix this with your simple human tools?" Yunji did not answer. She continued looking at the diagram. Her mind was working, connecting dots that others could not see. The first team began their presentation. They used advanced mathematical models that looked impressive. Graphs and charts filled the holographic display. They talked about quantum entanglement and energy transfer theories. Their presentation was complex and beautiful. But something was wrong. Yunji could see it. While others were impressed by the complicated words and beautiful graphics, she saw the fundamental problem. Lady Aria Voss watched from the side. She whispered to her brother, "Look at the human. She is not even trying. They will fail, just like we know they will." Lord Derek nodded. "Humans are always out of their depth," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. Yunji heard them, but she did not react. She continued studying the system. Her mind was working like a machine, breaking down the complex problem into simple pieces. The first team finished their presentation. The judges looked impressed, but Yunji saw something else. She saw a solution that was much simpler than anyone realized. No one was paying attention to the quiet woman in the work jacket. No one except a few junior engineers who had noticed how carefully she was watching the system. Something was about to change, and no one knew it yet. The engineering hall was quiet except for the soft humming of machines. Most teams were deep in their work, running complex computer programs and creating fancy simulations. But Yunji was different. She had found a small corner with some basic tools and a simple workbench. Her hands moved quickly. She was not using any of the fancy holographic computers. Instead, she had a few simple tools, some wire, and a small device she had pulled from her work bag. The other engineers looked at her with confusion. How could she hope to solve a problem that had stopped the galaxy's best minds? Lord Derek walked by her workspace. He stopped and looked down at her work. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice full of doubt. Eunji looked up briefly. "Solving the problem," she said simply. Her approach was nothing like the other engineers. While they used complex theories and advanced computers, she was looking at the system like a mechanic would look at a broken machine. She saw the system not as a collection of complicated quantum interactions, but as a series of connected parts that needed to work together. The junior engineers began to notice her. They watched carefully as she moved small parts around, creating a simple model of the quantum stabilization system. Some of them whispered to each other. Was she really going to present something so basic? Lady Aria Voss walked closer. "This is impossible," she said loudly. "Our best engineers have failed. What makes this human think she can do anything?" Eunji continued working. She did not listen to the comments. Her fingers moved carefully, connecting small pieces in a way that seemed almost too simple to work. The first team finished their presentation. Their solution was complex. They had created a 3D model that showed hundreds of possible energy transfer paths. The judges looked impressed. The team had used advanced mathematics and complicated quantum theory. When it was time for their evaluation, the lead judge asked detailed questions. The team answered with long, complicated explanations. They used words that most people could not understand. They talked about quantum entanglement and multidimensional energy transfer. But Eunji saw something different. While others saw a complex problem, she saw a simple one. It was like looking at a complicated machine and seeing the one small part that was causing all the trouble. Her model was different. It was small. It looked almost too simple to work. Where the other teams had created massive, complicated solutions, her approach was direct and basic. Some of the alien engineers started to laugh. "Look at the human solution," one of them said. "It is like a child's toy compared to our advanced technology." Lord Derek heard the comments and smiled. "Humans always think they can compete with advanced civilizations," he said to his sister, "but they do not understand true technological complexity." Eunji finished her small model. It was about the size of a dinner plate. Most of the engineers thought it was a joke. How could something so small solve a problem that had stopped the most advanced engineers in the galaxy? She carefully placed her model next to the massive holographic displays and complex computer systems. The contrast was clear. Her solution looked simple. Too simple. The junior engineers watched with interest. They saw something the others did not. While the senior engineers laughed, these younger engineers noticed how carefully Eunji had studied the system. "We will now hear from the human team," the lead judge announced. Eunji stepped forward. Her work jacket was worn. Her hands were calloused. She looked nothing like the other engineers in their fancy uniforms. Lord Derek crossed his arms. Lady Aria looked ready to laugh. No one knew what was about to happen, but something was different this time. The room went silent when Eunji began her presentation. Her voice was calm and clear. She did not use complicated words. She spoke like someone explaining how to fix a simple machine. "The problem is not in the complex parts," she said. "The problem is in how these parts work together." She pointed to her small model. It looked nothing like the massive, complicated systems the other engineers had created. Her model was clean and simple. It had fewer parts, but something about it was different. The lead judge leaned forward. His eyes were curious. He had seen hundreds of presentations, but something about this one felt unusual. Eunji explained how the quantum stabilization system was like a machine with a small but critical weakness. While other engineers tried to fix everything at once, she had found the one point where the entire system was breaking down. Lord Derek looked angry. He did not like how calm she was. He did not like how simple her explanation sounded. "This is impossible," he muttered to his sister. "She cannot be serious." Lady Aria nodded. "Look how simple her model is," she whispered. "It is like a child's project." But the junior engineers were watching carefully. They saw something different. They noticed how Eunji had studied every single part of the system. Where others saw complexity, she saw a simple problem. Eunji connected her small model to the main system. The holographic displays flickered. Most of the engineers expected nothing to happen. They were ready to laugh. Then something unexpected occurred. The energy readings on the main display began to change. Slowly at first, then more quickly. The complicated graphs that had been unstable for years started to become smooth. Lines that used to jump and shake now moved in clean, straight paths. One of the senior engineers checked the readings. Then he checked them again. His hands were shaking. "This cannot be right," he said. But it was right. Yunji's simple model was doing something that years of complex research had failed to do. It was stabilizing the quantum energy system. The junior engineers moved closer. They wanted to see how she had done it. Some of them pulled out small recording devices to capture what was happening. Lord Derek's face changed. The confident smile disappeared. He looked confused. How could something so simple work when their most advanced technology had failed? "Explain," the lead judge said. His voice was serious. Yunji began to talk. She explained how she had seen the system differently. Where others saw a complex problem, she saw a simple machine with a small but critical error. She talked about her work back on Earth, how she had learned to fix machines with limited resources, how sometimes the simplest solution was the best one. The other engineers listened. Some of them looked angry. Some looked surprised. A few looked interested. Lady Aria could not believe what she was seeing. Her brother stood silent. The proud Krellian aristocrats who had been laughing just minutes before now looked confused. The lead judge asked more questions. Yunji answered each one clearly. She did not use complicated words. She explained everything as if she was talking to someone who knew nothing about engineering. The holographic display continued to show stable energy readings. The system that had been broken for decades was now working perfectly. One of the junior engineers whispered to another. She did what no one else could do. Yunji finished her presentation. She stood quietly. Her work jacket was still worn. Her hands were still calloused. She looked exactly the same as when she had first walked into the room. But everything had changed. The room was completely silent. No one knew what to say. The day after Yunji's presentation, everything changed. The engineering hall buzzed with tension. People spoke in hushed voices. The quantum stabilization system was working better than it had in decades, and no one knew what to do about it. Lord Derek Voss called an emergency meeting. His office was at the top of the station, with windows that showed the endless space outside. The walls were covered with awards and certificates from the most prestigious engineering institutions in the galaxy. "We cannot let a human take credit for this," he told the other senior engineers. His voice was hard and cold. The engineers looked nervous. They knew what Lord Derek could do. He was not just an aristocrat. He was someone with power to block careers and destroy reputations. "Her solution challenges everything we know," said one engineer. "It is too simple, too direct." Lord Derek nodded. "Exactly," he said. "If her method works, it means our entire approach to quantum engineering is wrong. We cannot allow that to happen." Outside the meeting room, Yunji waited. She knew something was happening. The station felt different. People looked at her differently, some with respect, some with anger. A junior engineer approached her. His name was Jae Sung, and he looked excited. "What you did," he whispered, "it is amazing. No one has ever solved this problem before." Yunji just smiled. She knew how these things worked. Success was not always welcome, especially when it came from someone unexpected. The official engineering team began to prepare their response. They started creating complex reports. They wrote long papers explaining why Yunji's solution could not possibly work. They used big words. They created complicated graphs. But the data did not lie. The quantum stabilization system was working perfectly. Energy flows that used to be unstable were now smooth. Trade routes that were dangerous were now safe. Lady Aria Voss joined her brother's efforts. She began to spread rumors. The human must have cheated, she told other important people. Her solution is too simple to be real. Yoonji continued working. She did not pay attention to the rumors. She knew her solution was good. She had spent years fixing machines with limited resources. She understood something the other engineers did not. The station's leadership called for a full review of Yoonji's work. This was not normal. Usually, a successful solution would be celebrated, but this was different. Her solution challenged too many things. Jae-sung came to Yoonji again. "They are trying to block your presentation," he said. "Lord Derek does not want you to show how you fixed the system." Yoonji was not surprised. "Sometimes," she said, "people are more afraid of change than they are of problems." The other engineers watched her, some with anger, some with respect, some with fear. Lord Derek prepared his final move. He would try to completely block Yoonji from presenting her full findings. He would protect the old way of doing things. He would protect the system that had kept his people in power. But Yoonji was not like other engineers. She had learned to solve problems with very little. She had grown up fixing machines in difficult conditions. She knew how to fight when the system was against her. The station held its breath. Something big was about to happen. Yoonji stood quietly. Her work jacket was still worn. Her hands were still strong. She waited. The fight was just beginning. The main hall of Nexus Prime was packed. People from different alien species filled every seat. Some stood in the back. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Yoonji stood on the small stage. She looked calm. Her worn work jacket was the same as always. Behind her, a massive screen showed complex energy system diagrams. Lord Derek had tried to stop this demonstration. He had made phone calls. He had sent official papers. But something had changed. Too many people knew about her work now. Too many junior engineers and station workers wanted to see the truth. "We will now hear the full presentation from the human engineering team," the announcer said. The room was so quiet that people could hear their own breathing. Jae-sung, the junior engineer who had been helping Yoonji, sat in the front row. He looked nervous but excited. He knew something important was about to happen. Yoonji began to speak. Her voice was clear and simple. She did not use complicated words. She explained the quantum stabilization system like she was talking to friends. "The system is like a machine," she said. "Every machine has a simple way to work. We just need to find that way." Lord Derek sat in the front row. His face was red. He looked angry. Next to him, Lady Aria watched with hard eyes. Yoonji showed her simple model. It was smaller than most of the machines in the room. Some people started to laugh. But Jae-sung and a few other junior engineers watched carefully. She connected her model to the main system. The big screen behind her changed. Energy lines that used to jump and move crazy now became smooth. It was like watching a wild river suddenly become calm. The lead engineer from the previous team stood up. "This is impossible," he said loudly. But the screen showed different. The data was clear. Yoonji's simple solution worked better than anything they had tried before. Lord Derek tried to interrupt. "We need more tests," he shouted, but nobody was listening to him anymore. One by one, the station's top engineers came forward. They checked the data. They ran their own tests. Each test showed the same thing. Yoonji's solution was perfect. The junior engineers were the most excited. They saw something important. A simple solution could beat years of complex thinking. Lady Aria whispered to her brother, "This cannot be happening." But it was happening. Yoonji explained how she had solved the problem. She talked about her work back on Earth, how she had learned to fix machines with very little, how sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. The screen behind her showed more data. Trade routes that were dangerous were now safe. Energy systems that used to waste power now worked perfectly. Everything was more efficient. Some of the older engineers looked shocked. Some looked angry. A few looked interested. Jae-sung stood up. "This is amazing," he said loudly. Other junior engineers joined him. They started to clap. The clapping grew. More and more people joined. Soon, the entire hall was clapping. Lord Derek sat still. His face was white. Everything he believed was falling apart. Yunji finished her presentation. She stood quietly. She was the same person who had walked into the station days before. Nothing about her had changed. But everything had changed. The room was full of noise. People talked. People argued. But one thing was clear. Something big had just happened. A human from a working-class background had just changed everything. The days after Yunji's presentation changed everything. News spread across the galaxy faster than anyone could have imagined. Her simple solution to the quantum stabilization system became the talk of every space station and trading port. Trade routes that were once dangerous became safe. Ships that used to lose money now made profits. The entire economic system began to shift. Lord Derek Voss sat in his office. The walls that once held his proud awards now felt empty. His computer screen showed reports he did not want to see. Everywhere, people were talking about the human engineer. Junior engineers from different alien species began to look at problems differently. Where they used to create complex solutions, now they tried to find simple answers. Yunji had changed how people thought about technology. The junior engineer named Jae-sung started a study group. They met in small rooms across the station. They discussed Yunji's approach, how she had solved a problem that had stopped the best minds in the galaxy. "Look at how she thinks," Jae-sung would say. "She sees systems as machines, not as complicated theories, but as things that can be fixed." News reached Earth. The small delegation that had come to Nexus Prime was now famous. Yunji's colleagues looked at her differently. She was no longer just another engineer. She was someone who had changed everything. Lord Derek tried to fight back. He wrote long reports. He called important meetings, but nobody listened anymore. The data was clear. Yunji's solution worked. Lady Area Voss watched her brother's power shrink. The Krellian aristocratic system that had controlled technology for hundreds of years was falling apart. Their complicated ways of thinking were being replaced by something simpler. On space stations and trading ports, people began to tell Yunji's story. A human from a working-class background who had solved a problem that stopped the most advanced civilizations. The economic impact was huge. Trade routes became safer. Energy systems became more efficient. Companies that used the new solution started to make more money. The entire galactic economy began to change. Yunji kept working. She did not stop. She looked at more systems, more problems that people thought were too complicated to solve. Jae-sung and other junior engineers started to follow her work. They created a network. They shared ideas. They tried to solve problems the way Yunji did. Lord Derek's influence disappeared quickly. The aristocratic system that had controlled technology for so long was falling apart. People no longer believed that only the most expensive and complicated solutions could work. Universities across different planets began to change their teaching. They started to teach students to look for simple solutions, to think like Yunji had thought. The quantum stabilization system was just the beginning. People started to look at other complex problems differently. They asked simple questions. They tried to find direct solutions. Lady Area watched her brother's world fall apart. The Krellian aristocrats who had laughed at humans were now being laughed at themselves. Yunji did not celebrate. She continued working. She looked at more systems, more problems that needed solving. The junior engineers created a network. They shared her approach. They learned from her method of solving problems. Space stations buzzed with new energy. Junior engineers from different species talked about Yunji. They shared her story. They studied her approach. The old system was breaking. A new way of thinking was taking over. Simple, direct, effective. Lord Derek tried one last meeting. He called the most important leaders, but nobody came. Nobody cared about his old ways anymore. Yunji continued working. Her worn work jacket, her calloused hands. She was the same person, but she had changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same again. The meeting room was silent when Unji walked in. Lord Derek sat at the head of a long table. Important leaders from different alien species waited around him. Their faces looked tired. They looked worried. "We will discuss the recent technological changes," Lord Derek announced. But everyone knew what he really wanted. He wanted to find a way to stop Unji. Unji wore the same work jacket she always wore. Her hands were calloused. Her eyes were clear and sharp. She looked different from everyone else in the room. Lord Derek tried first. "Your solution is too simple," he said. "It cannot be trusted." Unji looked at him. "Simple does not mean bad," she said. "Simple means clear." The other leaders watched carefully. They had seen the data. They knew Unji's solution worked better than anything they had tried before. "We have years of research," Lord Derek said. His voice was loud. "Decades of complex studies. And you think you can change everything with one simple solution." Unji did not get angry. She did not raise her voice. She explained carefully. "Complex does not always mean better," she said. "Sometimes, complex means broken." Jae-sung, the junior engineer who had supported her, sat in the room. He watched carefully. He knew something important was happening. Lord Derek pulled out thick reports. Pages and pages of complicated graphs. Complex mathematical formulas filled the pages. "Look," he said, "this is real engineering." Unji took the reports. She looked through them quickly. Then she showed the leaders where the problems were. She pointed out small mistakes, simple errors that nobody had seen before. "Your complex systems have basic problems," she said. "You are building complicated machines on broken foundations." The leaders looked surprised. Nobody had ever spoken to Lord Derek like this before. Lady Aria sat next to her brother. Her face was getting red. She did not like what was happening. Unji continued. She explained how she had learned to fix machines, how she had grown up solving problems with very little, how sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. "Technology should help people," she said, "not make things more complicated." Lord Derek tried another attack. "You are just a human," he said, "from a working-class background. You cannot understand advanced technology." Unji smiled. "Technology is about solving problems," she said, "not about showing how smart you are." The junior engineers in the room started to smile. They understood what she was saying. Lord Derek's reports looked less impressive now. Unji had shown the mistakes in just a few minutes. Mistakes that had been hiding for years. "Your entire approach is wrong," Unji said. "You create complex systems to hide simple problems." Lady Aria stood up. "This is impossible," she said, but her voice was not as strong as before. Jae-sung and other junior engineers watched carefully. They saw something important happening. The old system was falling apart. Lord Derek tried one last time. "We will not accept your solution," he said. Unji looked at him. "The data speaks for itself," she said simply. The leaders looked at each other. They knew she was right. Lord Derek's power was disappearing. His complicated world was falling apart. A simple solution had done what years of complex research could not do. Lady Aria sat down. She looked smaller now. The proud aristocrats were not so proud anymore. Unji finished speaking. She did not celebrate. She was the same person who had walked into the station weeks before. But everything had changed. The room was silent. Everyone knew something big had just happened. 1 month after the big meeting, everything looked different. Nexus Prime Station had changed. The halls that used to feel cold and complicated now felt open and clear. Unji sat in a new office. It was not big. It was not fancy, but it was hers. Junior engineers from different alien species came to learn from her. They brought complex problems. She helped them find simple solutions. Jae-sung worked with her now. He had become her main assistant. Together, they looked at systems that nobody thought could be fixed. Lord Derek was gone. The Krellian aristocratic system that had controlled technology for hundreds of years had fallen apart. New leaders were taking over, leaders who understood that simple solutions could be powerful. Lady Aria tried to keep some of her old power, but nobody listened to her anymore. The junior engineers laughed when she tried to talk about complex systems. Yunji's quantum stabilization solution had changed everything. Trade routes became safer. Energy systems became more efficient. Companies made more money. Governments started to change how they thought about technology. Universities began to teach differently. They told students to look for simple solutions, to think like Yunji had thought, to see systems as machines that could be fixed. Her story spread across the galaxy. People told how a human from a working-class background had changed everything, how she had solved a problem that had stopped the most advanced civilizations. The research center gave Yunji a special position. She would lead a new team, a team that would look at the most complicated problems in different systems. "We need people who can see things differently," the lead researcher told her. "People who can find simple solutions to complex problems." Jae-sung helped her build the team. They chose junior engineers from different planets, engineers who thought like Yunji, who saw systems as machines that could be fixed. Her first big project was a transportation network that had been broken for years. Other engineers had tried to fix it. They had created complex solutions. Nothing worked. Yunji and her team looked at it differently. They saw the simple problems that nobody had noticed before. They created a solution that made the entire network work perfectly. More projects came. A communication system on a distant planet. An energy grid that had been inefficient for decades. Each time, Yunji found simple solutions that nobody else could see. The junior engineers called her the problem solver. They created a network. They shared her methods. They learned from her approach. Lord Derek tried to fight back one last time. He wrote papers. He tried to show that her solutions were not good, but nobody listened. The data showed that she was right. Yunji did not care about being famous. She continued working. She wore the same work jacket. Her hands were still calloused. She was the same person she had always been. But she had changed everything. Universities started to teach her method. Junior engineers from different species studied her approach. They learned to look at problems differently. The old system of complicated, complex solutions was falling apart. A new way of thinking was taking over. Simple, direct, effective. Jae-sung watched her work. He knew something important was happening. They were not just solving technical problems. They were changing how people thought about solving problems. Her team grew. More junior engineers wanted to work with her. They came from different planets, different species, but they all believed in the same thing. Simple solutions can change everything. Yunji looked at the new research center. It was not big. It was not fancy, but it was full of hope, full of people who wanted to solve problems differently. The galaxy would never be the same again. A human from a working-class background has shown that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one.